I founded it in November 2016, after the election, and it started off at a Democratic uh, look at the results of the election on the Thursday after the Tuesday election. And they drew all the volunteers and all the very active Democrats from Santa Clara Valley. So I live in the Bay Area in Palo Alto, and the so there were probably 70 of us who came together. We had probably 2,000 volunteers who worked out of the Democratic Volunteer Center in Palo Alto. And so they broke into storming groups, and people proposed what groups to break into, and they just went around the room. They didn't ask anybody to make a speech or anything. And I put my hand up, and they called on me, and I said, I'm going to form a nonprofit group called National Voter Corps. I've already worked this out in my mind, because we have to make sure that every American has the right to vote. And I stood up, and they put that down on the list. And about 13 of us went into the corner in this large room, and we agreed to come to my house the next day. And out of that, a nucleus formed, and I got a volunteer law firm to do the trademark for the name. And we just set out what we wanted to do. We came up with a mission statement, and we've been working since then.
And you're an entirely volunteer organization.
Absolutely. There's no one paid. No one's paid at all. Essentially, we have paid for speakers to fly up to talk in the Bay Area. We paid Ari Berman, whom you may or may not have heard of, but is one of the leading experts on voting rights in America, is a journalist. And we did a nationwide webcam at that point. I mean, it was, we did it as we had 200 people in an auditorium. These are all pre-COVID, of course. We had one of the leaders in the American Indian or Native American tribal problems of voting speaking on the same panel, and Ari spoke, and it was fabulous. The link for that is, I'm sure, is still on our website. And so our expenses were to try to grow our system, to expand our message, but pretty much we are a total volunteer organization.
Mm-hmm. And then, but you also work nationwide. You work with a bunch of other groups and organizations.
Definitely.
How are you able to sort of stay organized and make cohesive initiatives with all of these different things happening?
Well, we are very focused. So the first 2 years, we wanted to educate. And what we did was, first of all, I educated myself, and I created a slideshow on voting rights and vote suppression, which is up on the web, and you can listen to it if you want, and you can see it. And then one of our people who's not a lawyer, who is into marketing, made a different version of it. So there's 2 versions up there, one of which is, I find it very difficult to use. I have given it, but I don't like it because it's not thorough enough. Because one of the problems is that people talk in jargon, and they don't actually explain what's happened, because if you don't understand what's happened, you don't know how to find a cure for it. You can discuss things at length, but if you don't understand what actually has happened, the solution is not there. You have to find the facts in order to get to the solution. It's not an emotional thing. You have to be intellectual. And the problem is many people are just intellectual and not, just emotional and not looking for ways to educate. My course is really a civics class, but I have given this talk all around the Bay Area, not, probably to a couple thousand people, but which isn't a lot. But those people have expanded by doing their thing. And I do believe that networking is the solution. You
Mhm.
can't solve the problem yourself. You have to join with other groups. So if you look at our map, we have a map on our website, and on the map, if you click on the state, it gives all the volunteer organizations who are, and we only do nonpartisan. We don't do partisan. It's people who really care about justice and civil rights. And we've been very involved with the League of Women Voters in many states. Um, Common Cause, the Brennan Center, the information sources are really important. I attend many voting rights programs. By using Zoom, I've been able to make a lot more connections. Our board of directors, we were bigger, but several of them spun off to work in another organization, which we were supporting the whole time, called Reclaim Our Vote. We
Mhm.
discovered through our trying to build our map we came across these organizations, and then we help them. So we have expanded. We had 20 million contacts through one organization, in which at least three of our people got involved with that organization because of our organization. And, I'm very proud of that. I think that's what our goal was, which, and this was to help people who are brown and black or people of minorities in the Deep South who had been disenfranchised in 20 by the vote suppression measures in the Deep South. And we hooked up with a woman from Reclaim Our Vote, whose name is Andrea Miller. And we have literally driven out volunteers, many, many thousands of volunteers, and 20 million hits since I think it's either since 2016 or 2018. But for sure, the work that was done has resulted in Doug Jones' election, without doubt in my mind, in 2018, because we got out the vote, and it took people by surprise because we helped to register literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in Alabama who had been disenfranchised,
Mhm.
and he won. So, I mean, that's just by example. So networking is really the solution. You can't do it yourself.
Just in terms of like getting people to vote, or sort of for fulfilling your mission, which I get the sense is getting individuals to vote, but also fighting voter suppression and those sorts of things. What have you seen as being really effective?
The most effective thing was to get involved with an organization already there, such as Reclaim Our Vote, which is the Center for Common Good, which is funded by the NAACP, and to hook up with them and help them use the methodologies they already had started and expand their volunteer base, which is what we did. In other words, we are not finding the solution for the specific problem. We're finding the volunteers to enhance those that have a good solution. So you make a judgment call, and then we peppered our volunteer lists, and we don't overly contact our people, because you become a dead letter
Mhm.
box if you're not careful.
Yeah.
But by getting, the first thing we did was we had about 200 volunteers here who went and verified the groups in each state, whether they were existing, who their leaders were, what their website was, and confirming all that and getting it into our map. Once that was done, and we had personal contacts with these organizations, people would report back to us, we came across this organization and they really seem to have their wits about them. They seem to be doing the right thing, exactly what our mission is. And so that we made contacts. We'd have a forum where we got the leader of Reclaim Our Vote out and went to Portola Valley, went to Palo Alto, went to Sunnyvale, and raised money. big money. And these were people who were fed up with vote suppression, who were wanted to do something and wanted to make sure that 2020 was not a repeat of a 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And by that sounds partisan, but in this instance, it wasn't. It was to make sure that everyone could vote. We believe that if everybody were voting, we would not have Donald Trump. Well, we know that.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal was to make sure that people had the right, because your voice is your vote, or your vote is your voice. So
Yeah.
you put it either way you want, so does that answer your question?
Yeah. And then in terms of that, so you founded this organization in 2016. Now it's been 4 years. Have you seen anything really encouraging during this election cycle or recently around the amount of people volunteering, the amount of organizations, or the expertise, sort of?
Oh yeah. Now, when a friend of mine who's on our board says that he got 10,000 postcards done by people who have never been politically active in their lives, simply by saying, aren't you fed up with this? And getting them involved. Well, for him, this is a guy who never had been involved in politics before 2016. And he's on our board, but that's only one example.
Mm-hmm. And I did want to ask you about, I mean, you say you guys don't flood anyone with too much information. Um, what is or do you have an opinion on the way that social media is being used and just being flooded with go vote posts? And do you feel like that is effective or not?
Well, my own opinion is that it's there's 60 million people have voted early, 64 million. I actually right now, the night news is on and I haven't caught up to see how many have voted. As of last night, I believe 64 million had voted early. That is because of all the early work. Now what they're trying to do is find the people who haven't voted. And frankly, I think they need to stop this thunderous texting. I mean, I'm in the middle of a meeting and the texts are just whipping through. So we have to be careful that we don't turn off the teenagers or the young 20s and 30 somethings because they're just sick of it.
And then how important do you think, you're talking about you give presentations and speeches, how important is that education for people who are looking to get involved in voting rights and in fighting voter suppression?
Personally, I think it's essential. I think they have a very superficial knowledge of the Constitution, of what rights they have to vote, what the different amendments mean. They don't understand. They don't actually understand the importance of the state legislature in the Constitution for such things as redistricting. There's blind ignorance, probably because of the effort to not continue having civics or those things which aren't STEM. People are so focused on STEM education that they've lost out on what needs to be a basic education for everyone. Personally, I think education is the solution in personally. So what you have to do is when you see something, you have to go to where someone can make a difference. You can't just talk about it. I'm a person of action. You might have figured that out.
Um, and then I also wanted to ask you, because you're in California,
Mhm.
how important is it or how essential is it to have statewide or very local organizations versus just this national overarching thing? And how important is it to have leaders on the ground who are from these specific areas?
Well, I think you'll find that there are already leaders on the ground, and that whatever angle you might have for your organization, just as we discovered the leaders on the ground, and you can find them all on the map, by the way. You can take all the details that we have on our map and use those.
Have you seen anything in this particular election cycle what are certain issues in terms of voter suppression that you really think are priorities that should be addressed right now?
Right now,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the future.
helping people get right now, the most important thing is to help people get to the polls safely, and be able to vote if they are not going to vote by mail. And it's too late for them to, it's almost too late to put it in the mailbox. So in certain states, it's not, but any state which says the mail has to be delivered, has to be received by Wisconsin, for example, by election day, and you have the head of the mail, who is a Trump appointee, US Postal Service, who doesn't believe in one person, one vote, or in the importance of the US Postal Service because he wants to shut it down, then you need to get people to the polls, and you need to help the elderly and the disabled get to the polls, or get them to, if it's legal in your state, get their ballots and deliver them to the registrar of voters. Though that is the most important thing.
And then looking forward to obviously after this week, is there anything that you've seen in this election that has continued to be a problem in terms of voter suppression?
Of course, the US Supreme Court. It's absolutely insidious what they're doing. So you have to take over, you must take over every state legislature, which the Republicans did, which is how they were able to pass the suppressive vote identification laws, which is what is killing, and how they were able, because they had in a 5-4 decision, and 5-4 decisions are bad decisions, they overturned Shelby County. Shelby County, the important thing about Shelby County, and if you don't understand this, then you need to do your own basic work before you go any further. Shelby County ruled that Section 5 of the Section 4, Part 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was unconstitutional. And the justification for that was that it was 40 years out of date and no longer was important. And this is what Justice Ginsburg said in a pair quote. Finding Section 4, Article 4, Section 2 unconstitutional is like going out in a rainstorm and taking down your umbrella because you are not getting wet. And it was the day after Shelby County came down and they no longer had to have pre-clearance in the jurisdictions, pre-clearance by either the Justice Department or a judge of any changes in the law. And in those states, within a year, there were 35 states and counties that had suppressive vote suppression laws that were passed that would not have passed scrutiny if Shelby County had been ruled the other way. So this Alabama case decided that it was okay to shut down polling places in Black neighborhoods, that it was okay to require two forms of identification, that it was okay that the Wisconsin did not allow university students' school identification cards to be voter ID cards, that it was okay for a gun control license to be voter ID, but not a student ID card, etc. And then they had cross-check, and they removed 30 million voters by saying that these people were no longer voters. And in one county, they found that this one guy had just formed these lists, and they ruled it unconstitutional what this guy had done, but they had removed 6,000 voters from the voting roll. I mean, this is awful.
Is there anything else you would want to add in general about your organization or the election?
No, more importantly, to say to you that You need to read into the issue. You have to, you can look the citations that are on my slideshow. You can read my slideshow. If you haven't read it, you can at least inform yourself. And you can read the notes that are in the slideshow, which have the references to the different acts that impact vote suppression and voting rights.